Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hyfi Kids and Preschool Weekly Training Podcast. My name is Crystal Mazuka.
And I'm Isaac.
Hey guys, I'm Kayla.
And we are part of the Hyfi Kids and Preschool team, and we are so excited to be with you for another wonderful week here in September as we are talking about I Am Known, God Knows Me, how God is so personal with every single one of us. What a cool thing that we get to do. So, Isaac and Kayla, I have a question for you. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Okay. I know this one and it may be overused, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's just my favorite. My superpower, I want to travel at the speed of thought. Like I just want to think about somewhere and be there. I want to think about being at the beach and immediately be at the beach. I want to think about being on top of a mountain and just be on top of the mountain. So impatience is high in my world. So I want to think about it and just be there. So travel at the speed of thought. No more traffic. No more sitting in gridlock traffic. Just be there.
Okay,
that sounds really nice.
Isaac, what about you?
Okay. Again, I feel like this is a really easy one for me. From the age of like 5 to way older than I want to admit, I prayed for a long time for God to make me be able to fly. And is that one thing I'm still a little bitter about? Yes, but it's fine. Like I wish I could fly. Like since I was young, and like I even like did jump training as a kid so I could jump higher so I could try to feel like I was flying. Like I've always wanted to fly. Training. Like jumping out of a plane was one of my favorite things I've ever done because I was like, it feels like flying.
Nice. Man, I guess if I could have I feel like my kids would love for me to have the power to like move things with my mind, because then I wouldn't ask them for stuff like, you know, to take out the trash or to get me a drink of water, because then I could just sit there and do it myself. But if I were to pick a power, I think I would love to be able to, freeze time. And so then I could, just randomly in the middle of a workday, I could take a little nap. Or sometimes I stay up really late because I want to just have that relaxed time, but I could just freeze time and I could sit there and I could like knit my scarf or I could read my book, and then I could unfreeze time, go to sleep, and still get my 8 hours of sleep. So I think that would be very fun, is to freeze time.
Which is another way of saying you just want more time in your day, right?
That sounds amazing.
I'm not saying I don't want to see discontent with the time I have in my day, but yeah, it's a little bit that. It's so funny though, because when we think about superpowers, we just think about all the great things that we would love to be able to do. And, even maybe being known for those things that we're able to do. And what we're talking about right now is how God knows us, right? So Isaac, he knew that you weren't ever going to be able to fly, and that's okay. But also that he sees us. And this week we get to dive into the story of Zacchaeus. And anybody, if you're like me and you grew up in church, you automatically think about Zacchaeus. He was a
wee little man.
He was a wee little man. Zacchaeus, this I
want to know how many people listening just like sang the rest of the song for us.
And maybe did the little finger motions too. And it's funny because it's sometimes I'm like, I don't quite understand why that detail is in the story. Like, we know he climbs up in a tree because he wants to see Jesus, but did we have to know that it was because he was of short stature? But it's okay. But really getting to the heart of that, we know that Zacchaeus, he was not one of the cool kids. He was not in the popular crowd. He was very, very disliked. He was hated. He was rejected. And he just really didn't ever feel like he had his people. He didn't feel like that he belonged. And I think what's amazing is that every single one of us probably has a Zacchaeus moment in our lives where we felt that. We felt other, we felt outsider, and we can know that the kids coming into our ministries would feel that same way too. So this is a story that can resonate really, really well with kids, but it's like Zacchaeus, he had those feelings of just being an outsider and nobody wanting him and nobody knowing him and nobody liking him. And he hears about Jesus and something in him, his interest is sparked. And so again, he's a wee little man. He can't see over the crowd where Jesus is. And so Zacchaeus climbs up in a tree so he can see Jesus. Zacchaeus, he climbs up in this tree. He's looking for something. And I don't even think he knew what it was. But what was amazing is that Jesus sees him and he calls him by name. And he says, Zacchaeus, I see you. I want to spend time with you. I want to go over to your house. Can you imagine what that would have made Zacchaeus feel like? All the emotions, the thoughts that would have ran through his head, especially this guy who felt so outsider. He felt so much like he didn't belong. And Jesus sees him and Jesus invited him to say, I would like to spend time with you. And then Zacchaeus did. And it completely transformed his life. And so, like, guys, what would you say, like, thinking about this story, what difference does it make in a person's life to know that they are seen?
So I think one thing about this story that really stands out to me is that Zacchaeus, a lot of people saw Zacchaeus in one certain way. And when he was there, they saw him as this Zacchaeus, this wee little man, this tax collector. But when Jesus looked up into the tree and he saw Zacchaeus, he saw so much more. He knew his troubles. He knew his pains. He knew his heart. And I think for a lot of us as leaders, as volunteers in our children's ministry, we have an opportunity kind of to be a superhero to some of these kids because they're coming in on Sundays and some of them, they don't know, they don't have a best friend at church, or maybe they don't know anyone at church. But maybe some of these kids that are coming week after week, they come and they are so excited to see you. And you can comment on the fun dress that the little girl's wearing, or the shoes that make the little boy run faster, and all of these things. But we're seeing things on the outside. And a lot of times I think we miss some of the things that the kids are bringing with them into church. And it's not until we sit down for prayer request, and it's not until we start having these really cool conversations, these connection conversations where we start to ask kids questions about what's going on in their life, getting to know them better. That's when we start to see not just what they're wearing, not just if they're the loud kid or the quiet kid, but we actually get to see who they are and we get to see more into their heart. And then we get to then connect it even more because we only have a small glimpse even to what they're doing, but we get to connect that more into that Jesus knows their heart. God knows everything about them. And when we get to connect that to these kids, that the God who created them knows them, he knows their heart, he knows their struggles, he knows their pains, that is transformative for a kid. And I love that we get to teach that to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good, Isaac.
Kayla, I feel like you shared a story with us, how you kind of saw this, like the evidence of just the need for this in your own ministry at your church.
Yeah, so I've been thinking through a couple things as you guys are chatting. I love what you said, Isaac, about how like we get to connect it to kids that not only do we see them, but that God sees them and he knows them. And then to your question, Crystal, like what does it matter? Like what difference does it make for a kid to feel seen? And it's just, I keep thinking of this story of a kid that's in my ministry. And oftentimes we get so, it's us, y'all. We're in kids ministry. We're busy. We're going fast. We're running. And sometimes we just run past in order to get to the next thing or to make sure that this classroom is filled with this leader or that this kid who has this allergy really doesn't get this snack this Sunday. And so sometimes we can get into autopilot. And one of the ways I was reminded of that recently was having kids in my class. We always do prayer requests, and it's my favorite time because it's the time where kids just get to share what's going on. And sometimes those are really funny and really memorable. And then sometimes they're really challenging. And the kids know that they are seen and they are welcomed and that place is a safe place to share whatever's going on. And I had a kiddo in my class who hadn't been there in several weeks. And when it came to prayer request time, he began sharing about how he prayed and said, Miss Kayla, will you pray for my dad to come home? Because their family is walking through divorce right now. And so it meant so much to that little boy that I am sitting on the ground with him. I am looking at him eye level, and he is able to share with me and for us to pray together for restoration for their family. And so it just means so much to these kids. And I think even for us too, as leaders, like, what difference does it make in the life of a kid that they are seeing? I think is one question but I think also another question is, what difference does it make in our lives and our hearts as leaders that we see and know the kids and the families around us? And I just keep going back to, with Zacchaeus and with the job that he had and the way that his reputation was amongst the people. He wasn't well liked. He wasn't well received. And a lot of people wouldn't look at him. And they would ignore him, or that they would chastise him for his job or what he did. And then you have Jesus, who he climbs up, like Zacchaeus climbs up in the sycamore tree, and just so he can get a glimpse of Jesus passing by. And then Jesus stops and he turns to Zacchaeus and he looks at him and says, Zacchaeus, come down. So I just think how powerful that moment could have been for Zacchaeus to see not just Jesus passing by, but Jesus stopping and looking at him and calling him by name. And I think so often as leaders, and even in the kids in our ministry, the functional belief that we have sometimes is that God is pleased with us in our striving and in our doing. And if we do this and do that, and we please our parents, if we're pleasing this person or that person, there's no margin for error or for failure. And where I see the gospel in this story is Jesus just comes to Zacchaeus and he says, I see you, come down. I'm coming to your house. And through that relationship, like Zacchaeus's life is transformed and changed. And so to answer your question, Crystal, it makes all the difference in the world, because it helps kids recognize and see, not only do we see kids and want to see kids and build that relationship with them, but the purpose of us building that is so that they can see God, and that they can know that it's God who sees them even better and more than we do. And I think that's something that's really cool for kids to hear this Sunday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This really makes me think too, we get to see kids and we get to help them know that God sees them and he knows them. But this week is also just such a good reminder that we have the incredible opportunity to help their families know this as well. The grownups that are bringing them to church, their parents, their grandparents, the neighbors, the aunts, the uncles, whoever it is that's dropping them off. Yeah. We want them to know this truth as well. Because the same way that it transforms the life of a child, it will transform the life of an adult. I think about those families we have that always show up late and they're coming in and they're hurried and they're scrambled, and it can just sort of feel like, okay, get your kids in here and go off to service. But let's let them know that we see them and that God sees them, giving ourselves the space and the margin to be able to check in with the families and say, so how's it going? What's going on in your life? The same way that we ask kids connect questions, we can ask these to adults as well. We can send them an email, a text message, or that check-in on Sunday or Wednesday night and just let them know, I see you and God sees you. Whatever is going on in your life, you're not alone in this. I see you. I care about you. I want to know you. And I also want you to know that God sees you. God cares about you, whatever is going on in your life. I mean, I know I would love that some Sunday mornings. I'm just in there thinking, I would love for somebody to just walk up to me and really look at me and say, how's it going? And to know that there's time for me to be able to share an answer, or for someone to share just an encouraging verse with me. I'm saying this as a mom of teenagers who I am like some days thinking, what in the world am I doing? And what's going on? And to know that I am seen and loved by others because they love God and they want me to know that God loves me. Like, that means just the world. And so, our hope and our prayer is that every single person listening to this that's going to engage with Hyfi this Sunday will be able to help kids see and know this truth, that they are seen and known and loved. But man, if we could take that one step further and help the families also know that they are seen and known and loved, I just think that that would be absolutely amazing.
It really would. And I love, Crystal, what you said about, hey, we need to make margin. This isn't something that's going to accidentally happen on a Sunday morning. We know that sometimes it gets crazy, but building in that margin, putting a reminder to say, hey, let's be sure I see so many kids, or I ask these kids a question. And even when you say, hey, how are you doing? Give them the opportunity to answer honestly. And I think that's something we say, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. Great. How are you? Great. Awesome. See you next week. But give them the opportunity to answer how they are really doing. I think that would be a great way just to simply start that conversation, start that dialogue to help see these families and see these kids.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode. We hope that you will come back next week as we continue talking about how we are known. God Knows My Story is going to be next week. And so you definitely won't want to miss that. Until then, we hope that you will enjoy Hyfi, enjoy your churches, know that we are praying for you. And we cannot wait to see what God is going to do as kids know that they are seen, known, and loved by Him.